I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad that you are my audience, because that just simply means that none of this is going to come as like a big shock to you. You guys understand, this is something that I've been talking about on the channel for quite a while now. Over the past year and a half, 2 years or so, I have been saying that there are cracks in the foundation of the video game industry, and things are going to get very, very ugly when it comes to the video game industry as we know it. Now, of course, a lot of this was just anecdotal evidence, but when the cold hard facts come out about a situation and there is concrete proof that something is very wrong with the video game industry, you guys aren't surprised by it. You knew that this was coming. You saw the writing on the wall. And maybe this is your first time here on the channel, and if so, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you're no longer blindsided by these things. You're no longer caught off guard when it comes to what is happening within the video game industry. Because the video game industry is in a downward spiral right now. And you could easily say that a video game crash is looming on the horizon, and you could even say that it's possibly here right now, because the information that was just given out very recently definitely shows that something is very, very wrong. Now, we of course talked about Black Friday sales in the United States as an indicator of what's happening within the industry. Within that information, we learned that during Black Friday weekend, the PlayStation 5 was the best-selling console. The Nintendo Switch 2 was in second place. In third place was the Next Playground, and in fourth place was Xbox consoles. Now, without having any sort of concrete numbers behind it, it really didn't mean all that much. The PlayStation 5 should have sold well. It was on sale for up to $100 off. The Nintendo Switch 2 is a premium system, and we could talk about the software of it, and maybe, diehard Nintendo fans rushed out to get it on day one, but as time has gone on, maybe some people are waiting a little bit to see some more bigger marquee titles. The Next Playground is just a weird thing that this must have been on like Good Morning America or some middle-aged white woman show to make this thing start selling very well. And Xbox is Xbox. So with that data, you're kind of like, okay, no big deal. But then the shit hits the fan. Then we get into the actual numbers that happened with this. So it was reported by Circana that in the month of November, United States hardware sales on video game consoles were the lowest they have been since November of 1995 at 1.6 million units sold total. The biggest month for buying video game consoles with holiday seasons on the horizon completely flatlined at 1.6 million units total in the United States. The worst since November of 1995. Now, we're going to get in our little time capsule here and take a look at the video game industry in 95. Because the video game industry in 1995 was a completely different beast than it is in the modern era. Back in 1995, you didn't have all of these crazy development costs, and you had something called competition. There were lots of consoles out there. If you sold 20 or 30 million units of your system, you were considered to be a huge success. In 1995, of course, the Sega Genesis was pretty much on its deathbed. The Super Nintendo, the same thing. Nintendo fans were looking forward to the Nintendo 64, known as the Ultra 64. When it comes to newer consoles that were available, you had things like the 3DO, which was very highly priced, the Sega Saturn, which had a bit of a struggle its first couple of years, and the Sony PlayStation, a relative unknown within the video game industry at that time frame. And that still was about what we see right now with huge industry giants, with billion-dollar games, with games needing to sell hundreds of thousands and millions of copies in order to just break even, not even considering it a success. You sold 100,000 copies of a game back in 1995, your sequel was automatically greenlit. So how do we get to this point? Why are people not buying video game consoles in 2025, especially during the holiday season, when this is usually some of the best time to see this sort of thing? Well, I mean, there's multiple different reasons. let's talk about the consoles themselves. We talked about the PlayStation 5. The PlayStation 5 has been out since 2020. Now, obviously, when you've been on the market for around 5+ years or so, you're not expecting things to be absolutely insane in terms of sales, unless you have something going on. A sale. But there really wasn't a big sale. Like, yes, the PlayStation 5 was $100 off, but that's essentially just offsetting the price increase that the PlayStation 5 got in 2025. With that price increase, the sale just brings it back down to the normal price that it was when the system first came out. So is it really a sale? Not necessarily. I mean, yes, it is lower than what the MSRP is right now, but it's simply just adjusting back to what it was previously before, things happen with tariffs and other things that we'll talk about in a little bit. The Nintendo Switch 2, interesting situation for Nintendo. With Nintendo always being viewed as the, lower price point entry of a system, $450 or $500 for a system that comes with Mario Kart World might be a little bit of a harder sale. And of course, you might have had people buy the system when it first came out because they wanted to have the system before the holiday season and didn't want to mess around with stuff like that. But I honestly feel like there are at least some Nintendo fans out there looking at the software that has come out and be like, okay, Mario Kart World was dope. Donkey Kong Bonanza was dope. Hyrule Warriors, if you like that style of game, was cool. But there really hasn't been anything super groundbreaking for the system. And when you look at the first half of 2025, or 2026, I should say, at least what we know is coming out from Nintendo themselves, not really anything lighting the world on fire. Like, I've gone on record as saying that, looking at the games that Nintendo themselves have announced, I've just kind of been like, oh, I guess there's some interesting stuff here. But, that's just kind of how I think I'm viewing it, and maybe potentially other people are viewing it. The next thing, like I said, I don't know what the hell's going on with that. And Xbox, who the hell knows what's going on with Xbox, except for high prices on their system. The system costs substantially more now than what it did when it first came out around the same time that the PlayStation 5 did. When you're not having monumental sales of systems and different bundles and different discounts of things, people are going to be spending less. Everything is going up in price right now, it seems like. And, it's not just your food and your rent and stuff like that, which is stuff that has always been happening. It's now your computers, your technology, your video games are going up in price. And here's the crazy thing, folks. It's just going to get worse. We know that it is going to get worse. We know that. 100%. Why? Because of the AI boom. The biggest problem with this whole situation, we've moved on from tariffs being our comfort blanket, and yes, tariffs did play a role, but was it as substantial as companies wanted to make it out to be? In my opinion, not really, but hey, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But I feel like everyone can agree on one thing. The AI situation is not going to get better anytime soon, and this isn't just going to affect video game consoles, it's going to affect everything. Anything that uses any sort of memory is going to be affected by this. All these stupid ass smart devices, smart cars, cell phones, computers, televisions, and of course, video game consoles. Many people are expecting video game consoles to once again go up in price in 2026. And I think that is a fair assumption to make. So now you're going to start charging people more for the same thing, because as we've learned on this channel, yesterday's price is not today's price, and today's price is not tomorrow's price. So eventually companies are going to have to start dealing with things like that. But it also extends into game development itself, because how do you make a game? Like, what makes a game? A computer. So if companies are having to spend more money to make the games, and they're having to spend more money in order to have additional memory and stuff like that, in order to create these games, that is going to be passed on to you. Now, I don't think the situation looks nearly as dire in other regions as it does in the United States. But that's kind of the whole point of the video game crash of 1983. It was a regional thing. It was a United States thing. When you look at video games in Japan and you look at video games in Europe, they were fine. There was many personal computers, the weird stuff that Europe had. And of course, you had the Famicom in 1983 come out in Japan, the family computer system, and everyone loved it, and it was super successful. And then it was branded as the NES in '85 as a, you know, premium sort of device, not trying to be a video game system, but an entertainment system, which kind of offset it and allowed retailers to have a little bit of confidence in it once it started testing well in various markets. You don't have that same sort of situation here, though. Now, granted, Japan does have a system or a region lock system for the Nintendo Switch 2, and they are getting one for the PlayStation 5. I'm not sure if it's quite out yet, but these are cheaper systems for that audience. So Japan is actually going to become a very important piece in this equation once again. You know anything about me, I always say, you know, it's kind of weird how companies still do a lot of stuff specifically for the Japanese audience, but maybe this is a reason why that, like, it makes sense. You know, it makes sense to do this because you're trying to figure out ways to offset what you're going to have to deal with in other regions. Now, I guess technically all of these companies could make a US only, you know, specific system that can't play Japanese stuff and stuff like that. But then we're just getting back to a time point when region locking was a whole big thing. And I feel like we've kind of moved beyond that in the Western market as far as having to do something like that. And would a company really be willing to do it? You have to remember, whether, you know, no matter where you live, you know, I don't know if you live in the United States, Canada, England, Japan, Africa, the Middle East, wherever you live, at the end of the day, the US is the biggest market for video game stuff, for video game sales, console sales. If you look at any pie chart from the past 2 decades, you would see that the majority of game sales and the majority of system sales for 99.5% of systems and games come from the United States. Now, we do have some outlier stuff. Obviously, we're seeing a big boom with Chinese games, I should say, that are kind of on the rise, and now we're seeing China start to become this powerhouse of, you know, video games and having a very loyal fan base with people purchasing games that are done by Chinese developers and stuff like that. But in the grand scheme of things, you know, it's mostly a United States sort of thing. And if that's crumbling, that's buckling at the knees with the lowest month since November of 1995, 30 years ago. And then you sit back and you look at the video game industry 30 years ago and you compare it to where we're at now. The advancements made, the technological advancements, something has to give. Something has to give. I don't know what the answer is to this, because now you've gone so far with these games and the technology and stuff like that. For whatever reason, the companies don't want to have to kind of stop. They don't want to innovate. They're happy with what they're doing. They found a formula that works for them. And then you start to diminish the fact that, you know, competition is starting to come down to a close. Everyone's kind of kumbayaing, and people are thinking, oh, well, PC gaming will be on the rise. No, that's not the case. PC gaming is so much more expensive now because of the AI shit. And the AI shit isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen when the next Xbox is announced and it's over $1,000? What's going to happen when the PlayStation 6 is announced and it's closing in at $1,000? Because there's going to be potentially multiple SKUs. Now you're starting to hear that it's not necessarily going to push the medium quite as far as other generational jumps have, which have become a law of diminishing returns anyways to begin with. Like, let's be super realistic here. Unless you have a hard-on for, like, ray tracing and stuff like that. You know, obviously, the more powerful systems can have a little more tricks and bells and whistles, but, you know, I would say 85% of people don't even necessarily care about that, especially when it starts to impact how long games take to come out, because we're no longer in the era. You go back to 95, a game is a success, next year it's got a sequel. And sometimes these sequels were full-on reinventions of it. Think of it was considered a long time when it took 2 years for Resident Evil 2 to come out, but after Resident Evil 1. And think of the leap that was made in terms of graphics on the same system, in terms of storytelling on the same system. It was crazy. And that was considered like a big deal. Oh, wow, it's taking so long. They rebooted the whole thing. You know, they had Resident Evil 1.5, which had Leon and the other female character, I can't remember her name right off the top of my head. They were in a police station and stuff like that, and it was like a different style of police station, very different style of game, and then they scratched it. And then they made this whole huge adventure of Resident Evil 2 all within 2 years. Now you have companies like Naughty Dog. You're lucky to get one game a generation. How does anyone think this is sustainable? People are penny pinching nowadays. When all of your bills are going up, you have less money to spend on video games. And if the industry has to revert back to 1995 standards in terms of sales, in terms of, in terms of game sales, in terms of system sales and stuff like that, holy shit, it's going to be a wild ride. It's going to be absolute pandemonium. But what can you do? I think it's gotten to a point where it's out of the consumer's control. $80 games, $90 games, $100 games, $1,000 systems. You're going to start seeing those 1995 numbers again, pal. But like I said at the start of this video, you're not surprised. You're not surprised by any of this. You saw the writing on the wall. You understood that this was essentially a dam. And all the water was building up pressure, building up pressure, building up pressure. More water was being added with more problems being added. And eventually that dam was going to burst. And I think the dam has burst. I don't think all the water has come down to us yet. But I think if you look and you look towards the top of the dam, you could tell that something is very wrong. And it's not going to get better anytime soon. There's going to have to be some major changes. This is not sustainable. And the sustainability is clearly shown in the data. With 1.6 million units sold across PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch 2, the next thing, and Xbox. All system variants as well. Remember back in the day, you didn't have all these system variants. You didn't have a Lite, you didn't have a Pro, you didn't have an X, you didn't have an S, you didn't have this, that, or the other. And this is what we're looking at. Oh, man. Well, let me know what you think of it in the comments section down below. Because I think this is going to be, a polarizing topic. And people are going to, probably disagree with some of the things I have to say on it. And that's fine, I always welcome a conversation on it. I'm just talking about it from my viewpoint. And I think, I think I'm coming from a very normal place. When a system is coming out in Q1 of 2026, the Steam Deck, and we don't know the price of it because the company doesn't know the price of it, because all of this stuff just keeps going up in price that is going to be used to build this system that is a Steam machine under your television. I think that's very telling for how the economy when it comes to technology right now is functioning. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Hit the bell as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.